Hey y'all, we're in Arco in Butte County with
Steve Cody.
And Steve, over the course of your lifetime, have you experienced any changes in the climate?
Nothing that I would consider to be out of the norm, the normal changes. There was a fella, I can't remember his name, but his name was Brown. I think he was with ISU. And he did a study of this area in, I think, 78. And they studied pack rat middens, which I think has some veracity. And he studied them, and he saw seasonal changes. And he said, we're in a dry mode right now. So that study, I forget the name of it, but I read it thoroughly, and it seemed to be very well done, peer-reviewed, all that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I worked for Snow Survey for USDA for about 25 years, and I'm not seeing the climate change except there might be a slight warming. But as far as what I would call, a climate crisis, there is none. If there is, it's all computer modeling.
When did you first learn about climate change or hear about it?
Oh, Al Gore's book, really.
Okay.
I read that, and on the first 7 pages, there was 7 major blunders. And I know there were blunders because I do the hydrology of this county. So he mentioned this county and how our rainfall had increased, which is pure baloney. So I know the rainfall hasn't increased. We measure it every year, all year long. So I think what's happened is they've blown this, they've made it into a crisis, and they've made predictions over the years that have not come true. And when you start looking at things like, what's the name of it? Susan, excuse me just a second. Is she here? What's the name of that rock? Is it Plymouth Rock where they had that stone set up? Yeah. Anyway, there's a Plymouth Rock, and it was set in 1630 or 1650. And you can see that where it's set, the ocean level hasn't changed. Now, they say they can tell the ocean level has changed by millimeters from satellites. And I've done enough surveying to know that that's baloney. You can't measure that amount. It's such a tiny amount. They said the oceans have risen. And then you look at the shipyards and places like that, the ocean hasn't risen. So what they're going by is climate models. But when climate models, and this is according to a climatologist, I think from the University of Louisiana, in testimonies under oath to Congress, and he said that what they're basing it upon is the climate models, not what's happening on the ground. So therefore, if you have a resource model, you test it by seeing if it's actually happening on the ground, and it's not. So therefore, you've got to assume that your model's wrong, but they're not. For some reason, it seems to be an agenda, and they're talking about their carbon sequestration. Well, if we want to do carbon sequestration, we can do that with livestock. Yet they want to get rid of livestock too, because that's my forte, is stockmanship and livestock and enhancing soil carbon using livestock. So, that would be a big thing. We should do it anyway. That's one of the most important factors in soil health anyway. So anyway, my view of this is there's another agenda behind this, because I am not seeing on the ground what they're saying is happening. And this guy said too, he's a climatologist, and like I said before, testifying before Congress, and this was a few years ago, and he says it's not happening. We're not seeing it on the ground. And the other thing is I'm interested in World War II aircraft. And what happens in Greenland, there was 3 P-38s that landed in 43, 46. And what happened is the guy that was going after him wanted to get one of the P-38s out there, a very valuable airplane. And if the plane was nose heavy, it should have done this and gone down through the ice. It didn't. What happened was the ice accumulated over the P-38s, and he was trying to get sponsors, and he listed 238 feet of ice on top of those P-38s. So the fact that in that spot in Greenland, the ice sheet was melting was baloney. It's just junk science. I don't know why they can say that, because it's very checkable. And so they've done a lot of different things too, like they say that the ice pack, every layer in the ice pack is a different year. And I've studied snowpack enough to know that's not true. That you can have storms during the winter lay multiple layers during 1 year. So that's my kind of thoughts about climate change.
Do you think there's anything we can do about climate change?
Well, I don't believe it exists in a crisis mode anyway, but I do believe, a lot of the things we can do reducing carbon. One of the things that we've done across the United States is we've gotten rid of the bison. And there used to be probably 90 million bison. And there was untold number of elk and antelope, bighorn sheep, and herds of cattle and herds of horses from the Spaniards. And what we've done is we've taken the Great Plains and we've turned them into mostly corn. And the corn is used to feed cattle. But my forte is managing the cattle, even without fences, to restore the land. And I've taken Alan Savory. Have you heard Alan Savory? You need to hear of him. He's incredibly, he developed a book, well, and a method called holistic management. So when we put his planned grazing and holistic management together with proper livestock handling, which is my forte, we found incredible excuse me, incredible increases in carbon in the soil. In fact, a 1% increase each year.
Wow.
So the amount of tonnage that we can save, and we know back from the 1880s, there was a guy that worked, he was presenting I forgot his name, presenting a talk to the Nebraska Dairymen's Council, and he recorded what the soils were like in the 1880s and on through under farmland conditions. And I'm not against farmland at all. And then he recorded it under the conditions with the bison, and it's incredibly different soils. I mean, everything increases, the hydrology.
Because of the tilling?
Yeah, because of the tillage and releasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The other thing is that when you graze with livestock, and it can be sheep or goats or cattle or horses or, bison, I really don't care. What happens is that when you graze a plant like the bunchgrass plants that we have growing up here, it kills and shortens some of the root growth. But what happens is the soil organisms take the sugar and the proteins. It's almost like a sugar and a protein. ARS with USDA discovered this. A gal, really smart gal, discovered this some years ago. And what happens is that the plant actually has a net benefit of about 60%. So, I mean, that's a pretty good gain. So what we're finding is grazing increases the plants, proper grazing, like Alan Savory says, increases the number of plants, the health of the plants. It increases the absorption of infiltration of water and decreases the flow, the rapid flow off a watershed. So we get slower absorption, you get better riparian areas, we have more wildlife. There's just not a loss on that. And I've written a book on that called Manual of Stockmanship, and I've written some other books for USDA too, so I've studied that exhaustively. So I think that's the way to store carbon. They've got some other things going on that I don't understand, but I think we need to do that anyway. If we can switch from some of the grains that we're growing, the exhaustive corn isn't really good for the soil, like pasture would be good for the soil. And we have pasture-fed beef. We just have to change some of the ways we think and some of the breeds of cattle. There's cattle that are more adapted to that than others. And so, and a lot of people are doing that. And I like pasture-fed beef. At first I thought it was kind of hard to cook, it was a little bit, but these, and what, at feedlots, I'm not against them, but there's an awful lot of sickness. They use a lot of, bicarbonate of soda, a lot of antibiotics and things like that too that you wouldn't need. In fact, if you handle cattle like I teach, cows don't get sick. They don't get sick in the feedlot, and they don't get sick in the pasture. And I've written, like I said, exhaustively on that in my book, Manual of Stockmanship, which has been going around the world. So,
Manual of Stockmanship.
Manual of Stockmanship, right.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And then we just need a quick